North Korea released photographs showing the progress allegedly made on a nuclear powered submarine. North Korean leader Kim Jong Un inspected the burgundy colored hull of the vessel inside an assembly hall. He was accompanied by senior officials as well as his daughter. The construction of the submarine comes in a response to South Korea's plan to also acquire a nuclear powered submarine, a move which Kim Jong Un described as an offensive act that would escalate military tensions in the region. The North Korean leader said the South Korean plan demonstrated why North Korea's army needs to modernize.
Hey everyone, Bill Harris here. And the video you just watched stated that North Korea just released new images showing significant progress on what they're calling their first nuclear-powered submarine. This is a major development in the Korean Peninsula's arms race, and it's directly connected to recent decisions by the Trump administration regarding South Korea's own submarine ambitions. Today I'm going to break down what we actually know about this submarine, what the strategic implications are, how this ties into the broader geopolitical situation, and what experts are saying about North Korea's technical capabilities. Let's get into it. All right, so on Thursday, December 25th, North Korea's state media agency KCNA released photographs showing Kim Jong Un inspecting what appears to be a largely completed nuclear-powered submarine at an undisclosed shipyard. According to NBC News reporting, North Korea's official Korean Central News Agency said Kim visited a shipyard to inspect the construction of what the North describes as an 8,700-ton class nuclear-propelled submarine, which the leader has called a crucial step in the modernization and nuclear armament of North Korea's Navy. The images show Kim, accompanied by senior officials and his daughter, examining a massive burgundy-colored vessel inside an assembly hall. The submarine appears to be coated with anti-corrosion paint, which according to experts is typically applied in the final stages before a vessel is launched. This is the first time North Korean state media has released images of the submarine since March, when they showed mostly the lower sections. Now we're seeing what appears to be a nearly complete hull. According to CNN's report, the pictures released by state media showed leader Kim Jong Un inspecting the guided missile submarine at an indoor construction facility, indicating it has not yet been launched. The agency didn't specify when Kim made this visit, so we don't know if this is recent or if these are archival photos being released for strategic timing. That's typical of North Korean state media releases. North Korea has indicated it plans to arm this submarine with nuclear weapons, referring to it as either a strategic guided missile submarine or a strategic nuclear attack submarine. Kim has previously called it a crucial step in modernizing North Korea's Navy. In the same announcement, KCNA also reported that Kim supervised tests of a new long-range anti-air missile on Wednesday, which was fired toward the East Sea. South Korea's defense ministry detected the launch but didn't immediately comment on the specifics. Now, what makes this announcement particularly interesting is the language Kim used during the inspection, because it's directly aimed at recent developments involving the United States and South Korea. According to ABC News, during the visit, Kim described South Korea's efforts to acquire a nuclear-powered submarine, which have been backed by U.S. President Donald Trump, as an offensive act that severely violates the North's security and maritime sovereignty. Kim went further, according to the reports. From NBC News, he says the South Korean plan further underscores the need to modernize and nuclear-arm North Korea's Navy, and claimed that the completion of his nuclear-powered submarine would be an epoch-making change in strengthening its nuclear war deterrent against what he called enemy threats. So let me give you the context on what Kim's referring to. In November, South Korean President Lee Jae-myung met with President Trump and called for U.S. support for South Korea's efforts to acquire nuclear-powered submarines. This has been a long-standing ambition for South Korea, but U.S. law prohibits the transfer of nuclear material for military use. However, according to Al Jazeera, South Korea could receive an exemption from U.S. President Donald Trump, the East Asian country's national security advisor, Wee Sung-lak, told the media following a meeting with Secretary of State Marco Rubio and Secretary of Energy Chris Wright. Trump has publicly stated that the United States is open to sharing the closely held technology that would allow South Korea to build a nuclear-powered submarine. This would be similar to the AUKUS agreement where the U.S. agreed to help Australia develop nuclear-powered submarines. But here's the key question. It's not immediately clear where or when such a vessel would be built, or how Seoul would obtain the nuclear fuel and reactor technology required. That's according to multiple reports. So while Trump has expressed openness to the idea, the practical implementation is still very much uncertain. Kim is essentially using Trump's stated willingness to help South Korea as justification for accelerating North Korea's own submarine program. He's framing it as a defensive response to what he calls a threat to North Korean security. Now let's talk about what we actually know about this submarine's capabilities and whether North Korea can realistically build and operate a nuclear-powered submarine. First, the advantages of nuclear-powered submarines are significant. According to CNN, they can stay submerged for long periods of time, essentially for years if they can carry enough provisions for the crew, whereas most conventionally powered subs must surface for air to run diesel engines, which in turn charge their batteries for running at depth. They are also generally faster than conventionally powered subs and are in many cases quieter. If North Korea successfully completes this submarine and it operates as intended, it would be a significant strategic development. The ability to launch missiles from underwater is particularly concerning because such launches are extremely difficult to detect in advance. However, experts have serious questions about whether North Korea actually has the technical capability and resources to build a functioning nuclear-powered submarine. The Washington Post notes that North Korea is a heavily sanctioned and impoverished country, raising questions about whether it could obtain the resources and technology needed for such an advanced system. That said, there's one factor that might have changed the equation: Russia. According to ABC News, some experts say North Korea's recent alignment with Russia, including sending thousands of troops and military equipment to support President Vladimir Putin's war in Ukraine, may have helped it to receive technological assistance. North Korea has sent thousands of soldiers to fight in Ukraine and in Russian territory captured by Ukrainian forces. In exchange, it's widely believed that Russia is providing North Korea with technological and material support, possibly including submarine technology. Vladimir Putin even sent Kim a New Year's greeting on Wednesday, according to Al Jazeera, thanking him for his ongoing military support for the war in Ukraine. So the Russia-North Korea military cooperation is very much active and publicly acknowledged. As for the timeline, experts believe the submarine could be tested relatively soon. According to a report from DNYUZ citing a former South Korean submarine officer, showing the entire vessel now seems to indicate that most of the equipment has already been installed and it is just about ready to be launched into the water. The North Korean submarine could possibly be tested at sea within months. CNN's reporting suggests a similar timeline. North Korea could conduct missile tests with the submarine after launching it within the next 2 years, according to Hong Min, a senior research fellow at the Korea Institute for National Unification in Seoul. Let me zoom out and put this in the broader context of what's happening on the Korean Peninsula and in Northeast Asia. This submarine is part of a much larger military modernization program that Kim announced back in 2021. According to the reports, Kim unveiled a wish list of advanced weaponry at a major political conference that year. The list included solid-fueled intercontinental ballistic missiles, hypersonic weapons, spy satellites, multi-warhead missiles, and nuclear-powered submarines. North Korea has been systematically working through that list. They've tested various missile systems, they've launched spy satellites, and they recently unveiled new naval destroyers. One of those destroyers actually capsized during its launch earlier this year, though it was subsequently refloated and apparently repaired. The point is, North Korea is engaged in a significant long-term military buildup. This isn't just one submarine. This is part of a broader strategic modernization of their military capabilities. Now, why is this happening? Kim frames it as a response to U.S.-led military threats. And there's no question that tensions on the Korean Peninsula have been escalating. According to NBC News, tensions on the Korean Peninsula have worsened in recent years as Kim accelerated his military nuclear program and deepened alignment with Moscow following Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Diplomacy between North Korea and the United States essentially collapsed in 2019. Trump and Kim had a summit during Trump's first term that ended without agreement. Since then, North Korea has refused to engage in denuclearization talks and has instead accelerated its weapons development programs. South Korea, for its part, has been strengthening its own military capabilities. According to CNN, South Korea boasts some of the world's best guided missile destroyers and new conventionally powered submarines. South Korea's Navy is technologically superior to North Korea's in most respects. But North Korea may have one advantage: timing. If they complete this nuclear-powered submarine in the next year or two, they'll have that capability before South Korea does. Even if Trump follows through on helping South Korea build nuclear subs, that process could take a decade, according to experts. Professor Leif Erik Easley from Ewha Women's University in Seoul, quoted by CNN, put it this way: Kim is probably right that a buildup of nuclear-powered submarines will increase instability around the Korean Peninsula, but he has himself to blame for the arms race. It is Pyongyang that disavows diplomacy with Seoul, threatens its neighbors with nuclear weapons, and deepens the suffering of its own people by devoting massive resources to military dictatorship rather than economic development. That's a pretty blunt assessment, but it reflects the view of many regional security experts, that North Korea's military spending comes at an enormous cost to its civilian population, and that the arms race on the peninsula is largely driven by North Korean provocations. Now let's talk about the U.S. policy angle here, because Trump's position on this is creating some interesting dynamics. On one hand, Trump has expressed willingness to help South Korea acquire nuclear-powered submarines, which would strengthen a key U.S. ally's military capabilities. On the other hand, that very willingness is being used by Kim Jong Un as justification for accelerating North Korea's own nuclear submarine program. So there's a question of whether Trump's approach is actually making the situation more stable or less stable. Is arming South Korea with more advanced weapons a deterrent that makes North Korea less likely to act aggressively? Or is it an escalation that provokes North Korea to accelerate its own weapons development, leading to a more dangerous arms race? There's no clear answer to that question. Security experts disagree. Some argue that a stronger South Korea creates stability through deterrence. Others argue that continued militarization on both sides increases the risk of miscalculation and conflict. What's clear is that diplomacy isn't happening right now. Trump had a unique relationship with Kim during his first term. They exchanged letters. They had summits. Trump even stepped into North Korea. But that diplomacy didn't lead to denuclearization. And since the failed 2019 summit, North Korea has essentially cut off meaningful diplomatic engagement. The question is whether Trump will try to revive that personal diplomacy in his second term, or whether he'll take a harder line. We don't know yet. What we do know is that North Korea continues to develop its weapons capabilities, and the U.S. continues to support its regional allies in developing their own capabilities in response. So what should we be watching for in terms of how this situation develops? First, watch for when and if North Korea actually launches this submarine. The fact that they're showing it now suggests they're close, but close in submarine construction could still mean months. A launch would be a significant moment and would likely be accompanied by propaganda and possibly a test of the submarine's missile systems. Second, watch for the U.S.-South Korea negotiations on nuclear submarine technology. If those talks progress, we'll learn more about the practical timeline and whether this is actually going to happen, or if it's more of a symbolic gesture. U.S. law currently prohibits this kind of technology transfer, so it would require either new legislation or a presidential exemption. Third, watch for any signs of Russian technical assistance to North Korea's submarine program. If Russia is helping North Korea develop this capability, that would represent a significant escalation in their military cooperation and would have implications far beyond the Korean Peninsula. Fourth, watch for how South Korea responds. Will they accelerate their own conventional submarine programs? Will they push harder for nuclear-powered subs? Will they develop other countermeasures? South Korea's response will shape the dynamics of this arms race. And fifth, watch for any signs of diplomatic engagement. Is there any possibility of negotiations? Any back-channel communications? Any indication that either side is interested in de-escalation? Right now, the answer appears to be no, but that could change. Look, here's the bottom line. North Korea is making real progress on developing a nuclear-powered submarine. Whether they can actually make it work remains to be seen, but the photos suggest they're further along than many experts expected. This is happening in the context of an escalating arms race on the Korean Peninsula, with North Korea accelerating its weapons programs and South Korea, backed by the United States, developing more advanced capabilities of its own. Kim Jong Un is using Trump's stated willingness to help South Korea acquire nuclear subs as justification for North Korea's own program. Whether that's genuine strategic concern or just convenient propaganda is debatable, but the effect is the same. Both sides are building up their military capabilities. The strategic implications are significant. A North Korean submarine capable of launching nuclear-armed missiles from underwater would be extremely difficult to track and defend against. It would represent a new dimension of threat in an already tense region. The question is whether this leads to greater instability and risk of conflict, or whether it eventually creates enough mutual deterrence that both sides become more interested in diplomatic solutions. History suggests the former is more likely in the short term, but the latter is possible in the long term. This is a developing story, and I'll continue to follow it. When North Korea launches this submarine, when we learn more about U.S.-South Korea cooperation on nuclear subs, when there are new diplomatic developments, I'll break it down for you. If you want to stay informed on stories like this, subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell. And if you appreciate this kind of in-depth, balanced analysis, let me know in the comments. This is Bill Harris, and I'll see you in the next one.